Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate against the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I applaud the sponsor's intent on this bill. I think that their passion and their intent is noble. I think that if the bill accomplished what it set out to, it should deserve everyone's support. I thoroughly believe, although I would like to be in denial, that this is a true problem in the communities in Idaho. All of that having been said, though, what the bill sets out to do won't be all that the bill accomplishes. The good gentleman from 17 said that this bill was designed to go after the pushers and not the users. And I fully acknowledge that that's the intent, but there's nothing in the language of the bill to differentiate the two. If somebody who's addicted to heroin barters with another person who's addicted to heroin a single-use supply, maybe the person who's doing the bartering was the person who got the other person addicted, but they're the ones who overdose. The other addict is subject to second-degree murder charges because of this legislation. The stated purpose of this legislation is also to make a statement. That statement is not going to be heard in the poppy fields of Afghanistan or in Mexico. That statement is going to be heard by the people who are struggling with these addictions here at home, and that statement will be, if you are at a party and your friend overdoses, do not call 911. One of the gentlemen who came to testify actually in favor of this legislation was a friend of the young man from Nampa who died. And I actually found his testimony to be very compelling for voting against this legislation. The young man shared that his friend had overdosed and had gone into what sounded like a coma. And his friends had got him revived and then left him in a bedroom to die and then hid his body for 2 days after he had died, rather than so much as kicking him out on the curb at the ER. If that's already happening, you're going to hear those stories more and more and more and more with legislation like this on the books. It's a serious problem. It needs to be addressed, but this legislation doesn't differentiate between the notorious kingpins, who are already, by the way, facing enough prison time to lock them in a hole for all of eternity between federal and state charges. It reaches out to those who are in the communities, those who are struggling, who are fellow addicts, who are suffering under this horrible poison. It's also mentioned that there's a great deal of prosecutorial discretion. And while I respect the hard job that our prosecutors do, that frankly frightens me. I can see those who need treatment, not prison, being charged with second-degree murder as leverage to try to get them to give up a dealer whose name they probably don't really know, or who they fear a great deal more than they fear our prison system, one or the other or both. I can also see people frightened by the prospect of facing second-degree murder charges, pleading guilty to charges for which they are not guilty, just to get the second-degree murder charge off their plate. Drug pushers already know they aren't welcome here, Mr. Speaker. They already know that what they're doing is illegal. They already know that what they're doing could get a lot of people a lot of jail time and kill a lot of people. They don't care. And so while I would gladly endorse the intent of this legislation, Mr. Speaker, we're called to vote on the language of the legislation, and the language of the legislation doesn't really help the problem, and I would encourage a no vote. Thank you.